Hi, my name is Cole from FCP Euro, and today we're going to be installing EBC brakes on our Mk8 Golf R. We're going to go 60 to 0 real quick. So the kit in front of me I have is the EBC brake kit for the Mk8 Golf R. This kit includes a set of EBC slotted rotors, NDX Blue Stuff EBC pads, brake pad anti-rattle clips, brake rotor screws, brake caliper bracket bolts, and brake caliper grease. Now this EBC brake kit is a great upgrade for the Mk8 if you're looking for something that's a little bit more aggressive but not going to a full race setup. Now these slotted rotors will allow us to have a little bit better cooling and initial bite from the pad. And these pads are a great compound because they have a initial strong bite when cold all the way up to track day conditions. Now if you're looking for something that is more track focused, this can be used as a track pad, but there are some more aggressive options if you're looking for something like a time attack pad. Now, if you're not looking for a performance upgrade, you're in luck because we offer genuine OEM, OE, and aftermarket options for the Mk8 Golf R brakes. So how do I know if I need to replace my brakes? Well, there's some symptoms that we will go over that will be some clear indications that you need to do a brake inspection. Over here, you'll see I have the brakes removed from our Mk8 Golf R on one side. And I'm looking at the rotor here and I'm seeing a bunch of little scores and marks, and there's a little lip here on the edge, and that's just indicating that this brake rotor does have some miles on it and it has some wear. Now there is a minimum thickness that I'll go over later, but this rotor is showing some signs of wear and you may feel it in the brake pedal. Looking at the pads, we still have meat left on here, but you can look for spots that are wearing unevenly or if the pad depth is just not above the wear limit. These bolts for the rear caliper brackets are actually one-time use, so we have to remove that caliper bracket to replace the rear rotor, so we're going to be replacing those bolts while we're doing that. Now, some telltale signs that you may need to do in brake inspection is if you hear some squeaking noise, grinding, if you feel some pulsations in the pedal, or if the overall braking performance is just not what it's supposed to be. When talking about service intervals, Volkswagen doesn't really publish a known service interval on the braking system. However, it's really dependent on how you're driving your vehicle. We've seen brakes needing to be replaced even at 30,000 miles. Let's now jump into the tools that we're going to need for this DIY. As far as tools go, we're going to need a 17mm wheel socket, 14mm triple square sockets, 10mm socket, 7mm Allen socket, 5mm Allen socket, and T30. We're going to need some torque wrenches that will be very low value all the way up to about 130 Newton meters. We will need an assortment of ratchets varying from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. We'll need a flathead screwdriver, a 90-degree pick, a Sharpie for marking our bolts, a rear piston brake caliper tool, some wire brushes along with some Q-tips, safety glasses, a syringe for removing the brake fluid, some brake cleaner, some lubricant for our seals, a hammer, a pair of diagonal cuts or flush cuts, a Scotch-Brite pad, and optional we have some power tools that make the job a little bit easier but are not needed. Now that we know all the tools, let's get into our DIY. Before we jack the car up and replace the brakes, we're going to have to disable a feature in the infotainment system and disconnect the battery. To start, we're going to turn on the ignition without starting the vehicle, wait for the startup procedure to happen. Once the infotainment system is all started up, we're going to want to go to the main menu and select Vehicle. Once Vehicle is selected, we're going to click on the Vehicle Car icon on the left side of the menu, swipe over into the settings, and click the brakes. Now there's going to be this menu item right here that says Automatic Activation with Ignition Off. We want to make sure that feature is turned off. It's going to pop up again and saying this little safety function, and we're going to say OK. With that setting off, we can now press our foot on the brake pedal and push down on the electric parking brake switch. Once that's done, we can turn the ignition off. As you'll see on the dash, there's going to be a message that's saying parking brake is not activated, and that's exactly what we want right now. Now that we have the parking brake disengaged and the ignition off, we can now exit the vehicle and disconnect the battery under the hood. Using a 10mm socket and a ratchet, we're going to loosen the clamp on the negative battery terminal, lift it up, take this panel that covers the positive battery terminal or any kind of insulator that will space these two apart, and let go of the negative clamp. Now that we have the battery disconnected, let's break free the lug bolts and lift the vehicle up. Now with our vehicle safely jacked up, we're going to start removing this wheel. If you're using a breaker bar and a socket, you're going to want to break the lug nuts loose on the ground first before you start lifting the vehicle. We're going to be using an impact socket, so we won't be needing to do that. We will need a 90-degree pick or the included tool in your vehicle to remove these plastic caps that are covering the lug bolts. So we're just going to go around, remove all of those, and now we can see our lug bolts. One thing we recommend when removing the wheels on this vehicle is using a wheel hanger. This just threads into one of the open holes and creates a stud that the wheel can now slide on. It's much easier to take the wheel on and off this way. This is the wheel key that you'll find in the trunk. Now with all of the lug bolts removed, you might have to give it a little tap or use a hammer on the back side to be able to free it from the hub and set it aside. Now that we have the wheel removed, it's a good time to mention if your vehicle has had a brake fluid flush before, or if the fluid level is very high on the brake fluid, it may be a good idea to suck a little bit of brake fluid out of the reservoir, so when we push the pistons back, that we're not going to be overflowing with fluid. Now, working at the caliper, we're going to want to remove this spring clip here that holds the caliper to the caliper bracket. There's a little groove that you have to push past. Once you do that, you can slide it out and pull it out here. Now with the spring clip removed, we're going to work our way on getting the caliper removed by first pulling these plastic caps out of these slide pin rubber boots. And one on the bottom. Little flathead screwdriver can help getting those out. Now with the boots removed, we can take our 7mm Allen socket and our ratchet, come over here. Once I have this top guide pin free, we're gonna loosen the bottom one. Now with the slide pins unbolted from the caliper bracket, we can slide them out and set them to the side. These may be a little bit stuck in there if they haven't been greased in a while, so don't be afraid to put a little bit of effort pulling it out. Now we can take the caliper and slightly slide it off of the actual rotor assembly. You'll see my pads here are sticking to the caliper itself, and with just a little bit of squeezing them together, we can remove them from the caliper. Now that the caliper is moved to the side, we can take a 90-degree pick or try to just release this clip here. This one's being a little stubborn, so a little trick is to get underneath of the release with a pick. All right. Now with the caliper having a little bit more free range of motion, I have some blue shop towels here that we're just gonna fold up a couple times, place on the top of this rotor here, rotate the assembly, and let it rest up top. We want to support the brake line so it's not hanging, and we don't want the caliper to put stress on the brake line. Once the caliper is removed, we can remove our brake pads. You'll see that the brake pads have an anti-rattle clip connecting both of them. This is a part that's included in our kit because these are very fragile and thin, and we do not want them to snap. There's really not much metal here, and it also tapers down. But these spring clips keep the pads from vibrating and chattering inside of the caliper assembly. Now with the brake pads removed, we're going to transition underneath the car and remove the 2 bolts that are holding on this caliper bracket. Underneath the vehicle, we'll have to remove these 2 triple square bolts, and that is going to be a M14 triple square socket. We have it on a 1/2 inch ratchet here for leverage ease. Just break these free. Now with the bottom bolt broken free, we're going to just start to loosen and break free that top bolt as well. Now that we have these both loose, we have an electric ratchet here just to speed things up. Once that bottom bolt is out, we're going to want to hold the caliper bracket when removing this so we don't drop that caliper bracket. These caliper bracket bolts are one-time use, so we can either throw these away or put them to the side and not get them confused with the new hardware that we have. One little trick you can do when removing the rotor is take one of the old lug bolts and thread it in a good amount to that rotor. So when we remove it, it's not going to fall. We'll need a T30 socket on some kind of impact or a ratchet. I'm using an impact here. If you do not have an impact, you can also counterhold this with a screwdriver by inserting a flathead screwdriver in the vanes of the brake disc. Removing this rotor screw. We have a new one in the kit, so this can be set aside. As you can see, it wasn't that hard for us to remove the rotor on this vehicle because of the low mileage, but if your vehicle has a little bit more miles on it, it might not be as easy, and you may need a hammer to whack the rotor a couple times to break it free, which in that case, this lug bolt in the hub will prevent that rotor from falling on your foot and creating a big ouchie. Once that is now broken free, we can remove this lug bolt and set it to the side. Looking at our hub assembly, you'll see that there's some rust and some corrosion, and when we're installing our new rotor, we want this to be a perfect mating surface as much as we can. I have some safety glasses here that I'll be wearing because we're going to be using a wire wheel or a wire brush to get rid of some of that corrosion. Some Scotch-Brite works as well. With the braking system, brake dust is very small particles, and we don't want to inhale any of that. So do not use compressed air to clean off anything. Always use some brake cleaner. Now that we have our mating surface all clean, I reinstalled our wheel hanger for ease of installation, and we can take the rotor and slide it onto the vehicle. Now in this kit, the rotors are directional, and the right side will have a sticker with a yellow right logo on it. This is going to be the left, so there is no sticker indicating that this is going to be the left side rotor. These rotors do have to go on the hub a certain way. There is a location where our rotor screw goes in, and that matches up on the hub. I have it located in the correct position here, pushing it forward a little bit and taking the new provided rotor screw and just threading it in by hand. I don't want to cross thread this because replacing this is not fun, because if you damage those threads, most likely you're going to have to replace that hub. Now, with that loosely installed, I'm just going to snug it up. And we also want to make sure this is all the way seated. A good way to do that is tap with a hammer and make sure that's sitting all the way flush. Now with our rotor screw installed, we can take our torque wrench set to 8 Newton meters. And then take a small screwdriver to counterhold in the vanes. Perfect. Now with the caliper bracket removed, it's a lot easier to get this nice and clean. You'll see there's going to be some buildup of rust or dirt and gunk and brake pad dust, and we want to get rid of most of that as possible. Again, never use air when cleaning a brake system. Always use some brake clean. I'm going to preliminary spray this down and then take a good wire brush and just do a nice pass through here. Now, if this is really old or rusty, you may want to get a set of files to break down that rust and get these mating surfaces nice and smooth. Now that we have our caliper bracket all nice and clean, we can apply some brake paste to the sliding portions of the caliper. So with the included grease in the kit, one pro tip, you can use a Q-tip or a cotton applicator like so. Just put a little bit on here and then work that grease into all of the parts that pad is going to slide on. We don't want a lot of grease on here, we just want a very thin coat. We're gonna apply grease to all these surfaces here on the caliper bracket. Thin coat, a little bit goes a long way. Any excess, we're gonna wanna make sure that we remove it and take it and just reapply it into an area that we haven't touched yet. Now that the caliper bracket is all cleaned and the sliding assemblies are greased, we can reinstall with our new included bolts, because these are going to be torqued to yield, which means they're a one-time use bolt. Just threading these in by hand, taking our M14 socket, just snugging them, and then we will take our torque wrench and torque these to 90 Newton meters initially. All right. Torquing the lower bolt here to 90 Newton meters as well. A little bit more room. All right, 90 Newton meters. Now that our initial 90 Newton meters is done on both bolts, we're going to have to do 90 degrees of rotation of stretch. Now, this is a very tight space, so it's hard to do an angle with a torque wrench and a smaller drive. So we're going to be doing this old-fashioned way with marking the bolt and then 90 degrees down, marking part of the body and rotating that bolt until those two lines meet. So with a Sharpie here, we're gonna just put a little mark on that, and then about 90 degrees, we'll put a little mark on the hub here. And these are rough angles. They're not perfect because we don't have an angle gauge. If you do desire to try to use an angle gauge, you can. It's just a really tight space and it might be hard to get an accurate measurement. So we're using the marking method here. Now we've upgraded from a 3/8 drive to a 1/2 inch drive to get us some more oomph with a M14 triple square socket. And like before, this is very tight, so it may require a couple swings to get that angle that we're looking for. Since we'll be stretching, it's going to require some more force, so be prepared to pull on this 1/2 inch ratchet. I'm double checking that my mark here is lining up with my other mark that I made. Now that indicates that we performed that stretch on that bolt. Now we're going to recreate that process with the lower bolt. Now, these EBC brake pads come with a brake pad wear sensor on one side, and this Golf R is not equipped with brake pad wear sensors in the rear, so we're not going to need it in this pad. We can take a pair of snippers or cutters, however we want to call them, and we can cut these wires right at the base because we're not going to need this part of the section. Now, if you're resourceful like me, I always like to keep these connector ends because they can be useful in other scenarios. Now, with that brake pad wear sensor wiring all gone, we can apply a little bit of grease on the backing pad here. 2 little drops, and then just take our finger and we're going to want to just spread this out nice and evenly. The reason why we're putting a little bit of grease on the back here is just to give it a anti-squeal property against the piston, and it won't rattle, make noise or anything like that. It just helps with kind of that NVH. We're just gonna duplicate that process on the other pad. and just spread it around. Try to keep that a nice thin layer. Now with the brake grease applied lightly on the backing plate of the brake pad, we can take the provided rattle clips that come in the kit and install them onto the new pads. Now they are directional, and you're going to want to take the pad with the spring on the back here, slide that clip in just like so. Sometimes you have to tighten up the gap a little bit to make it a snugger fit, and slide that on. Since I'm holding this pad, I'll take our other anti-rattle clip, rotate the anti-rattle clip so the little tang over here is hanging off the side. Give it a little slight squeeze and slide that on. Once we have one side done, we're going to install it on the opposite side. Once that's installed, they will look like so. We're going to just take the brake pads and slide them into this caliper bracket and make sure that everything slides nice and freely, and just leave them like so. One thing to note, the brake pad with the spring clip on it, we're going to want it to be oriented towards the inside of the car. We're going to want to take this caliper, grab some brake clean, and clean as much as we can off of the piston and the surrounding areas. Little wire brush helps a lot in this scenario, just to break up some of that debris. We're just cleaning all this out so it doesn't build up, and a clean caliper is a happy caliper. Now that we've cleaned this a little bit, we can position the caliper on top just like so. Since we're not using a scan tool to release the parking brake because it requires a special code for Germany, we're going to be using a 5mm Allen to remove these 2 bolts on the parking brake motor. Once those 2 bolts are removed, we can just work this motor off. You may have to use a little bit of force there and put this to the side. Now that we have the motor off the back, we're going to take our rear parking brake piston tool. You find the right key that fits in the slot that we have. Put it on the tool. Make sure this is threaded in a little bit. Line up the tool like so. And then we're going to want to turn this back so it has some pressure on it. Counter hold it with appropriate wrench, and then start to slowly screw in this piston. You'll see the piston starting to work in. I'm just making sure that's snug. Now you'll see that once we've hit the end, it will completely stop. Do not force it past this point. Once you've hit that point, we'll take this wrench, loosen this, and remove our tool. Next step is to make sure that the splines on the back of this have a little bit of grease. They have some on there, but I just want to make sure that has enough lubrication. We don't want a ton, so any excess, we don't want it to be overwhelming. Since we're going to be reinstalling the motor, we're going to want to make sure that this seal has proper lubrication as well. I'm using a little bit of silicone spray and then just rubbing that all around the seal. That will make installing that motor a lot easier. Now with that all lubricated, we can take our parking brake motor, line it up on the splines, and squeeze it together until it sits all the way flush. We're going to reinsert our bolts here, thread them in by hand, and now torque these bolts to 8 Newton meters. Now this kit does include new rubber boots for the slide pins. So to remove these, we'll take a flathead screwdriver, push it inwards, and pop it out. Again, repeat on the other side. Now with a Scotch-Brite pad that I've cut to this kind of size, we're going to want to insert this and just clean up that bore. If there's any corrosion or anything, just make sure that bore is nice and clean. for the new rubber piece. Now, with the new pieces in our hand, we're going to want to remove the cap out of them. Take some silicone spray or lubricant and push them in this orientation. You may have to grab a screwdriver and just aid them in. Be careful not to damage the rubber. These can be a little tricky, so be patient. Make sure they're pushed in all the way to the point where they're sitting flush on this backing piece. Now we're just going to do the duplicate on the other side of the caliper. We're going to take a little bit of this brake grease here on a Q-tip and coat the inside of this rubber bushing. Now we'll take our slide pins and a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just clean them up. And if they're really corroded and rusty, it may be a good idea to replace these sliding pins. Now we're going to put a light coat of grease on these sliding pins and slide them into the caliper. We're going to rotate the caliper back over the pads. We want to make sure that this brake hose is not twisted in any way, and slide the caliper over the brake pads like so. Now, you may have to push these slide pins back a little bit to get it to sit all the way. We'll take our 7mm socket, place it on in the slide pins, and then thread these in by hand to make sure we're not cross-threading. You may have to push down a little bit on the bottom bolt because there is going to be a spring in the pad. We're going to just snug these guide pins up. Be careful with this brake hose here again. And after they've been snugged up, we're going to come back and torque them to 35 Newton meters. We're going to just slide these caps in the end of these rubber boots, just like that. And then reconnect the electrical connector for the parking brake motor. Make sure we listen for that audible click. We'll take this new caliper spring clip included in the kit, press it into place. Usually you can do one side and then squeeze the other side in. With the new clips, it can be a little tight, which you can take a flathead screwdriver and push down right here to try to get it in. There we go. Now, when I say make sure they're in the appropriate grooves, you'll see there's a little notch right here that spring clip locks into. There's going to be one on both sides of it. So once we have the clip on, we're going to want to have to verify that it is in that groove. At this point, we are all finished on this side of the vehicle. We already replaced the brakes on the passenger side, which is going to be an identical procedure. So we're going to start reinstalling the wheel, dropping the car down, and continuing with this DIY. Now with our wheel hanger on here, we can reinstall our wheel. Make sure that it is sitting nice and flush. Take our 17mm socket with our wheel bolt, thread these all in, and then our wheel lock key with the bolt as well. Once the vehicle is safely lowered back on the ground, we're going to take our torque wrench here set to 140 Newton meters and torque these wheels in a diagonal pattern. Once we have the wheels torqued on both sides, we can reinstall our lug bolt caps here. For the locking nut, there is going to be a specific one that has the opening for the locking nut, right like so. Now that we have the wheels torqued and all of the caps installed, we're going to go inside the cabin, pump the brakes, and then go underneath the hood. Now we're just pumping the brake pedal here until it's firm, so we can head underneath the hood, reconnect the battery, and check the brake fluid level. We can reconnect our battery terminal here and torque this nut to 5 Newton meters. Now, directly to the left of the battery is going to be the brake fluid reservoir that we're going to want to make sure the level is set correctly. If we removed some previously, we may need to add some more back, or we may need to subtract some. Taking a look at our level, and it looks pretty good here. Let's shut the hood and go back inside the cabin. We're going to want to turn the ignition on, press our foot on the brake, and actuate the parking brake. Now, you'll see an error here. Don't be alarmed. We're going to deactivate the parking brake and then activate the parking brake again. You might want to do this a couple times just to make sure that it is activating correctly. Now that our parking brake's activating, we're going to want to go back to the section where we turned off the automatic activation and put it back on. You'll see there's going to be some warning lights here on the dash. We're going to want to clear fault codes and take the vehicle for a test drive to reset all of our basic things, and then we will need to reset the clocks and the windows. One thing to note on our test drive, we're going to want to bed in our brakes according to the manufacturer specifications on the brakes that you've selected. And with that, we just successfully installed new brakes on our Mk8 Golf R. If you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button. And if you have any comments or questions about what we covered today, be sure to drop it in the comments section below. And if you have a Mk8 Golf R like us, we have a lot more DIY videos coming for this chassis and many more. So be sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along. And my name's Cole from FCP Euro. Thanks for watching and have a great day.